In the world of bicycling, it seems like we're always advancing and trying to find better ways to do things. But what if we went to a forgotten piece of tech from 40 years ago? Let's find out. So being out here for a while, I could definitely determine I like this. I don't know why we abandoned this.
And today we're making the long-forgotten suspension stem of the 90s. First off, we're going to have to run over to the hardware store. Me in particular went to Ace, and inside a lot of their little shelves you'll find these nice steel bushings. You'll also want to grab some brass bushings or bronze bushings. And these rubber grommets, I wound up not using these ones. These were a tad too soft, so if you're a pretty small rider or for a kid's bike, I think they'd be fine. But for my 180 pounds, they were a little bit on the soft side, so later on I did go to a shock absorber bushing, just off a regular car. Now, upon shopping, I did not measure any of these pieces, so you'll have to probably take your stem with you or take some tape measure measurements. That way you can kind of piece it all together by feel. Anyways, we're going to go ahead and check out of the hardware store and get back to the shop and start welding. So what we've got here is our bushings. That's our bolt that does our travel. This stuff here is all part of the stem hinge, and I went with a shoulder bolt just for a little extra strength. Anyways, here's essentially all of our parts. We're going to need a little bit of 1.5 by 1.5 square tubing, 125 wall. We're going to start with cutting our stem off right here at the vertical portion of the tube, and we're going to grind that smooth. That way we have a nice place to weld to, because we're still going to use the main stem and the quill itself. We're going to use that inside the forks, and the other piece we're just going to make it hinge. So with all that being said, I'm going to go ahead and grind everything smooth. And now that that's all done, we can go ahead and take the other part of our stem and put a nice fish mouth on it. That way it fits up to get the bushing welded up to it. So a nice little fish mouth there. And to get the fish mouth, I'm just using the old flapper disco. That'll make a pretty quick job of it. From there, we're going to take our 1.5 by 1.5 square tubing and cut a triangle piece out. Again, I don't really measure that often, so I just kind of eyeball everything. But essentially, here's what we're going to be looking like. Now, I took that Sharpie. That's where I'm going to put another fish mouth so it fits up against the bottom of the stem. And I do have to drill out a little hole there. Now, this hole does have to be elongated a little bit height-wise. You'll see right here it's just a little 3/8 hole. I did wind up making it about a 1/2 inch overall height-wise channel by 3/8 thick, or wide. And this right here is going to be most of our assembly. And you'll see where that big steel bushing becomes our pivoting point. So I'm going to go ahead and just start welding everything together. And of course, while welding, I'm just kind of eyeballing it, making sure everything's nice and straight. So I always do 1 or 2 tacks first, measure it, bend it as needed, and then I finish up all the welds. Once I was happy with that, I went ahead and put on that little triangle piece. Now that triangle piece is what's going to hold that rubber bushing against the stem and the top portion. That way it gives the springy rebound feeling. Took a little bit of 80 grit sandpaper, rotated it inside the steel bushing so the bronze bushings fit inside. Now we're going to start on the stem piece. Now out of that 1.5 square tubing, I wound up cutting out this piece and drilling a 1/2 inch hole through it. You're going to want to make sure that your 1/2 inch hole is pretty darn tight to that shoulder bolt. That way there's no slop in it, because if you drill the hole too big, the handlebars are going to be all wibbly wobbly, and no one really cares for that. So now we have a nice tight fit. I actually do have to kind of almost peck the bolt into place, but we have our pivoting point, and everything looks pretty good and square there. So I went ahead and just welded the rest of it together and painted it with several coats of of that dull aluminum stuff. It makes everything look a little bit better, I'd say. You know, the welds are definitely not the prettiest, but I guarantee the penetration is plenty on this weld job here. My welder was cranked up pretty darn high. Right now I'm just kind of fast forwarding through the assembly. I did wind up using some marine grease, and this is in the hopes that the shoulder bolt to the bronze bushing, take up the wear there. I'm also using copper washers on each side. That way, if anything moves, all the movable parts that are up against mild steel are all rebuildable and replaceable. And you can also take up some slack. You know, as those copper washers wear down, you can give the head of the bolt, a 1/4 turn just to take up some of the slack. And from there, we have our final product. And I think it looks pretty darn good, you know, the welds aside, but overall pretty good. So I'm going to go ahead and take the Bicentennial Man bike and time-lapse swapping over the bars. Now, I did wind up changing the bars a little bit later, as you'll see. This is my first test, and right here is slow motion. I'm bouncing on the bike pretty hard, just seeing if I could see any kind of flexing or bending, any kind of deviations I really don't want. And with everything looking pretty good, I gave it my stamp of approval, and I think it's time for a real-world test.
All right, so we got the stem on the bike. Time to go for a first test. I actually have not ridden the bicycle yet. I wanted my reactions to be, live and candid, so here we go. Okay, so far it feels pretty good. It just feels like the bars flex, but they're not. Definitely an interesting feeling. Even though it was kind of crudely built, I think I really like this. It gives the bike like a nice feel of a little bit of compliance, because these are very low volume, high pressure tires, and they're really small. But I think I freaking dig this. I don't know why we left it behind in the 90s. Now, the one thing I have noticed that's going to take a while to get used to is the bars I'm using are about a 4-inch rise, and whenever you hit the brakes, it feels like the bars are like twisting forward in the stem a little bit because it's all rotating on that axis. But you just have to trust that your stem is tight. Now, I know that these things can be purchased for like $30, $40 on eBay used. But why do that when you can make your own for, really just a few scraps and a few bushings from the hardware store and some, bolts? Because even though this one may not be as nice as those ones that have the built-in shock absorber or billet aluminum, it doesn't matter. I'm having a great time out here. I learned something and had a new experience that I've never had before on a bike, which is pretty cool. And hopefully it inspires one of you guys that if you can't afford it or don't want to wait for it, just make it. Okay, now we're going to see if this thing will wheelie. I'm probably going to fall off the back end, but ooh. Okay, I accidentally hit the coaster brake and smashed down on the stem. But I still have all my teeth, so I'd say this thing's a win. I'm going to see if I can go down some little bumps and get some slow motion of the bushing doing its job on the stem. Because I think even though we abandoned this tech back in the 90s, I think there's something good here. Maybe not for mountain biking or anything too extreme, but for your typical hybrid comfort bike going through the city, or a little prototype bike like I'm riding that I built, it's perfect. I freaking dig it. I think it's an interesting feeling. Definitely feels easier on the wrists, even after just this short of time. And even the bumps in the road, or little rocks or crevices, I mean, it feels like this bike has been completely, like revamped. I mean, it almost feels like it has a suspension fork that doesn't. Now, the bars, they only move up and down maybe an inch, inch and a quarter. But whatever bushings I've got here, which are probably 70A on the Durameter scale, seem to be perfect with the amount of leverage that I gave it. But this is pretty cool. Anyways, guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.